SCP-6285 is called the Girl from Hell. Now listen, a lot of people say that the SCP-6000 series are not actually official, and it's true. These are all written in hopes that they get approved through the SCP Wiki when they actually start doing things in the 6000 range. So Dr. Cat has been putting these together because these are articles or stories written from different authors and stuff like that, and I really like covering them because they're in the spirit of SCPs, and hopefully these things will get on the wiki one day. But I really like Dr. Cat's animation, so we're gonna react to this one today. Guys, make sure to subscribe to Dr. Cat, subscribe to me if you like reaction videos, and let's get into this one.
When the Foundation first invited me to investigate Junestead, I thought for sure that had to be a mistake. SCP objects had never been particularly large, and if they were, they wouldn't have sent a measly Class C observer to assess the situation. But Junestead was a different story, one about an entire neighborhood that had recently seen the unexplained death of an elderly woman. According to the autopsy report, every bone in her body had been shattered, almost ground to dust. Wow. She had died in the middle of the street during daytime, yet no witnesses had come forward. My job was to find out why, and if an intervention was possible. They purchased me a house previously owned by the deceased victim. The manner of death had not been disclosed to the public, and the local police department was completely overwhelmed, allowing the Foundation to perform the autopsy. All the citizens knew was that the death had happened during the prior rainfall, and that the method was something they could only describe as unnatural. Honestly, the place was lovely. It had a real 70s vibe that had remained unchanged since the elderly woman had purchased it in her youth. Everything was clean, and the fridge was fully stocked. The neighbors seemed somewhat suspicious of me as I moved in.
Well,
For them, my strict demeanor didn't fit the neighborhood's aesthetic. I had intended to blend in, but I wasn't sure exactly what kind of people I'd be dealing with. Still, I made sure to arrange a very casual but large barbecue party as I arrived. It was a somber atmosphere, one filled with fake smiles and small talk, only serving to mask up the trauma that had happened only a few weeks prior. That party was actually where I got my first piece of intelligence. Though none wished to talk about the event that had transpired, I could hear whispers about the girl in the rain that had appeared just moments before the elderly woman had died. So what happened? I asked one of the neighbors, who promptly mumbled something about not knowing. Then one of the middle-aged men turned towards me. He looked sterner than the others, as if his facade of friendliness had worn off. He presented himself as Harold, and said he could explain what the whispers were all about. He turned his head away from the crowd, signaling for me to follow. These people tend to be suspicious, especially considering what happened to poor Mrs. Johnson. You gotta understand that taking over her house so soon after her death seems a bit, well, in poor taste. But it ain't your fault. I thought no one knew how she died. At least that's what the real estate agent told me when I got this house at a discounted rate. I half asked, half stated. It was, of course, a lie, as all the information I had came directly from the SCP Foundation. That's only partially true. We all heard the little girl cry before Mrs. Johnson's death, and we all heard her horrified screams as she left this world. But only I saw how she actually died, Harold said. So what actually went down here?
What happened?
It started with the rain. It was a strange sight, considering how dry this place tends to be. I mean, we have light showers every now and then, but this was proper downpour, unrelenting fucking madness. We just hid inside, none of us used to the harsh weather, but it was kind of exciting. Most of us sat by the windows, a cup of tea, or a glass of whiskey for the adults. There was just something so damn captivating by the rain, like we couldn't look away.
There's a lot of rain over here, y'all.
He gave me a look of concern. You're gonna think I'm crazy, just like the rest of the people here. I'll bet you a beer I've seen weirder things. Just go on, I said, trying not to sound too demanding. Then in the midst of it all, we just heard someone cry. It was such a weird sound too, as if it came from everywhere at once, but it definitely sounded like a little girl. I stuck my head out the window, trying to figure out where it came from, but there was just nothing there. It was like she was right next to me, and extremely far away all at once. Did you see her? I asked. He nodded. I actually saw Mrs. Johnson first. She came running out with her old-ass umbrella. It didn't even do much against the rain. Probably meant to keep the sun at bay or something. I didn't understand why she'd come out running. But then I realized she was running towards the sound. Then I saw the girl standing at the end of the road. She was walking through the ice-cold rain, wearing nothing more than a dress.
Look
She
your
was
feet,
drenched,
girl.
upset, and needed comfort.
It's like the
Mrs.
ring,
Johnson,
girl.
being the caring woman that she was, had already run
Tried
out to
to
comfort her. But he stopped talking.
The girl was from hell,
But
though.
what? I asked.
Looked like a
The
demon.
girl just didn't look right.
No.
There was something wrong about the way she moved.
She's all
He
decrepit.
explained. Something like those old marionette doll things. You know, the ones
God.
connected to strings
Like
controlled by someone
reanimated.
else? I nodded. It wasn't hard to picture, not after all the other strange creatures I'd seen. So, what happened to Mrs. Johnson? I asked. She just froze in place. The girl stopped crying, and the rain slowed down, like gravity no longer had the same effect on the droplets. Then
Wow.
this insane cracking sound rung through the neighborhood, and Mrs. Johnson just bent backwards. I knew her back had been broken, but that wasn't the end of it. Her legs followed, shattered to pieces, then her arms, and
Stop
he was
with the
getting
cracking
visibly
noise.
upset. So I put a comforting arm on his shoulder and told him to stop and breathe. I'd already heard all I
Wow.
needed to know.
Can
The
you
next part of my
imagine
mission
how
would to be
traumatizing
simply
that would be to
observe an
see
event.
that happen?
The others don't believe me,
Bone
but I'm
cracking
telling you,
sounds,
that's what I saw, he said as we parted ways. I spent the next week getting settled in,
God.
patiently awaiting the next storm. The
Still hearing
forecast
him.
had promised us sunshine and heat, but as with all unexplainable creatures, they don't adhere to the normal laws of nature.
That's right.
Then, 9 days after my move, I felt a drop of water hit my shoulder as I took out the trash.
Okay.
It has been a perfectly nice morning, but without warning, the entire sky had filled with thick
That's
black clouds.
anomalous.
Harold,
That's anomalous.
who turned out to be my next-door neighbor, stood on
Harold!
his porch. His face was pale from the memories of the past rainfall.
Harold, go,
he
man.
rushed inside and locked the doors,
He's like,
as did
"I ain't-
most of the neighborhood.
I ain't
Still,
going
a few
outside."
lingered behind, not believing the stories about the girl and Mrs. Johnson. I stayed on my porch, but I didn't go inside. From the little information I had, harm would only come to those who approached the girl.
You gotta see,
So I
right.
just had to wait and observe
gotta
her
see, too,
before
though.
reporting back to headquarters with suggestions on how to proceed. Over the next few minutes, the rain got heavier. Dark droplets fell from the black sky, hitting the ground louder than I thought rain alone could possibly be. That's when I heard the first few sobs coming from the street. They sounded oddly close, though I couldn't yet see the girl. A man stood on the other side of the street with a shotgun. His name was Bill, one of the neighbors that hadn't attended my barbecue. He was a large, quiet man.
Bill
one I'd
got a
never
shot
questioned about the first
outside,
event.
bruh.
The crying
He's like,
got
"I'm gonna
closer.
shoot whatever
Then I saw her,
moves."
dressed in a white dress, dark hair hanging in front of her face. Bill held his
Shoot her,
shotgun
Bill.
tightly and
Shoot
noticed me
her.
on the porch looking at him. He looked afraid, but I wasn't about to interfere. I'd been directly ordered against affecting the neighborhood's outcome.
Wow.
My job was simply to observe and assess. The girl got closer, her crying sending waves of devastation through my mind. I knew she wasn't human, yet I
Right.
got an unnerving feeling of sympathy for the girl, almost as if I was compelled to go and help her. I held back, naturally,
do it.
knowing what would happen if I did. But then I saw one of the doors down the street open up.
Somebody
A young
trying to
man
help
came
her.
out, looking worried. His name was Alex, and though
No,
he heard
Alex.
the crying during the last
Don't
event,
do it.
he hadn't been quick enough to see the death of Mrs. Johnson.
Don't do
What
it,
are you
Alex.
doing? Bill asked as he rushed towards Alex. She needs help.
No,
he
no,
said
no,
in
no.
an oddly
No,
monotonous
she
voice.
doesn't.
He just pushed past
She
Bill
doesn't.
and approached the girl.
No, it's gonna
Bill
crack
tried to
again.
stop him, even went as far as to raise his shotgun and shoot the girl. But something suddenly stopped him. I can't move. He managed to get out
She
before
finna
his
crack
arms
him.
twisted backwards, producing
Ah!
an ungodly loud crack that echoed through the neighborhood. Alex ignored him and kept walking towards the girl. With that, the
Don't do
rain
it.
slowed down and the crying stopped.
It's about to happen.
Alex was frozen in place just like Bill, and
Oh!
finally broke. The two men kept twisting as they screamed, their
They
bones
got 'em
shattering into
both!
1,000 pieces as they collapsed to the ground. A few neighbors came out to check on the dead men, but none
dang.
dared approach.
No.
After a few minutes of silent staring, the girl started walking again, finally leaving our neighborhood behind. That
Jesus
time,
Christ.
everyone had seen it, and denying
Ugh.
it would fall under the category of utter stupidity.
Right.
They knew at that moment that Junestead would never be the same.
Time to
Yet
administer
few of them would
amnestics
ever choose to leave.
everybody.
The police were called alongside an ambulance, but never showed up, as the Foundation had taken over all operations
Of
within
course.
the neighborhood that had fallen silent in shock and despair. Once the bodies had been cleared, I gave my statement to my superior. I was then ordered to stay for another week as I wrote my report. I recommended a full lockdown of the neighborhood and evacuation. But once resistance was met by the community, the Foundation had another idea. The neighborhood would be turned into a supervised, closed community, only accessible by the few that chose to stay behind, and SCP personnel with sufficient clearance. At the time of this report, there are 15 citizens living in the Junestead community and an additional 7 on-site SCP personnel, mostly D-class. Since the SCP takeover 1 month ago, 3 additional deaths have been reported, and the sightings of the crying girl seems to be getting more frequent. Should the sighting occur on a daily basis, a forced evacuation is recommended. Item number, SCP-6285. Object Class, Euclid. Special Containment Procedures. Efforts at evacuating the inhabitants of Junestead have been attempted, but were met with resistance. Current protocol dictates that no new inhabitants may settle down within a 20-mile radius of the urban region. Current citizens are all to obey emergency protocol, which entails staying inside whenever it rains. Description: SCP-6285 appears as a young girl wearing a white, thick winter dress. She's approximately 1.39 meters and estimated to be around 10 years old. She does not appear to be affected by the effects of water, as she only appears during heavy rain, but always seems to be dry. Upon entrance into the neighborhood, SCP-6285 will begin to cry loudly. Though her voice isn't loud in terms of volume, it can be heard throughout every home situated in Junestead. The girl will walk undisturbed through the neighborhood for a duration of 2 to 3 hours, and once she has exited, the rain will stop. Any attempt at approaching the girl will trigger SCP-6285, at which point she will stop dead in her tracks. The crying will fade, but she will not look at the approaching subject. The rain will slow down, and the air will seem to thicken, and each sound in the vicinity will feel muted. Once SCP-6285 has noticed the subject, there's no way to prevent the subsequent event. Regardless of measures taken to prevent loss of life, the subject will inevitably die. The method of death varies from person to person. In some cases, SCP-6285 won't have to approach at all. It will just turn its head towards the subject, and their insides will boil similar to microwaved flesh. In other cases, they will be compelled to mutilate themselves until death. Regardless of the case, the event will not end until the subject has passed.
That is
to this
horrible.
date, 6 documented subjects have succumbed to the effects of SCP-6285.
Jeez. That's a crazy SCP, guys. I really like these 6,000 articles. They are in the same spirit of SCP, and I think some of them are gonna get approved. I really don't know how the approval process works or whatever, but definitely pretty interesting to see, guys. I hope y'all enjoyed it. Make sure to subscribe to Dr. Cat's channel. Subscribe to me if you like reaction videos. Thanks so much for watching. As always, this is Zueljin signing off. We'll see you next time.